Meeting of the ISD 191 Burnsville-Egan Savage School Board. The date is October 22nd, 2020, and the time is 6:30 p.m. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Miller, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yep. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll start tonight by approving the agenda. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Director Schott, second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Miller. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Career,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Schatz,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Starting with the report section of our meeting, we'll start with Dr. Battle and Emina Aftadal, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. We will be receiving a report about district equity. Dr. Battle.
Thank you, Chair Alt and directors of the board. Tonight, we will present an update on our district equity plan. Since 2014, our district has engaged in implementation of culturally proficient school systems. Tonight, I will provide a review of our past equity plan, yearly work, plan for this year, and an overview of this year's plan components. Moving on to our purpose slide in the presentation. This plan seeks to keep us on track for our comprehensive implementation of culturally proficient school system, its framework, and its tools in the service of our mission, each student future ready and community strong. The next slide shows the 4 tools of CPSS. Overcoming barriers, which are caveats that assist in overcoming resistance to change, such as the unawareness of the need to adapt. The second tool, guiding principles of cultural proficiency, are the underlying core values of this approach, such as inherent in cross-cultural interactions and that are dynamics that must be acknowledged, adjusted to, and accepted. Cultural proficiency continuum. This is the language for describing both healthy and non-productive policies, practices, individual values, and behaviors. The continuum goes from cultural destructiveness to cultural proficiency. The essential elements are the behavioral standards for measuring and planning for growth toward cultural competence or cultural proficiency, such as institutionalizing in our system cultural knowledge. The next slide is captures our CPSS journey. I mentioned we began implementation in 2014, and so the first phase is exploration, then moving to installation, initial implementation, and full implementation. We are in the middle of full implementation. We need to reschedule employee training from last year that was interrupted due to COVID-19. However, we do have district CPSS trained facilitators, and just this past summer, Amina Oftadal and Maria Arago attended training and completed that advanced CPSS training. Now let's move on to our implementation history. So you see the 2 steps that we launched in 2014 through 2016, and then subsequent years. And last year, 2019-2020, we targeted training for non-teacher staff, such as our custodians and clerical staff. We launched district-wide professional development to sustain the use of CPSS, and we added support on onboarding of district leaders, including board members. So the next slide are the 7 strategies we will launched, some are continuing from before, to Embed and Sustain Cultural Proficient School System. District CPSS Equity Team, develop our site teams, continue with the Teacher Academy, continue with attracting, supporting, and retaining diverse staff, representation of diverse community on our advisory teams, continuing with our non-teaching staff training and an evaluation of the impact and effectiveness of our work. And so the next slide shows you a more detailed action steps as well as for each of the strategies. It also shows the timeline, persons responsible for leading and coordinating the action step, and metrics to inform yet to be developed SMART goals for success for each strategy. We're going to spend a little bit more time on this chart, and Amina Oftedal and I will share more information, and we're going to highlight a few. So first, if you look at the last column, you will see that we plan to conduct an equity audit. Previously, an equity audit was completed in 2014, so it's been 7 years, and it's time for another audit to be completed. The purpose of the 2014 audit was to examine teacher preparedness and program effectiveness within a school and across our district, and to determine if any differences in the services of students based on characteristics including gender, language spoken at home, and race and socioeconomic status. There were 3 areas of focus: teacher quality, programs, and achievement. I wanted to share a couple of the findings. One finding showed that 33% of our teachers disagreed that they possessed the knowledge and skills to develop culturally relevant lessons. Also, the previous audit found that 39% of teachers reported they possessed knowledge and skills to develop and deliver lessons to meet the needs of students learning English. From that audit report, there were 21 possible steps identified. A few of these steps were to develop high-quality math and reading core instruction, to take a culturally proficient approach to behavior intervention, and to have high-quality principal and district leadership. So using some of the findings from the previous equity audit report, we may want to ask, has there been an increase in the number of teachers reporting that they now have the knowledge and skills to develop culturally relevant lessons? Is the expected increase based on the professional development that teachers have been engaged in since 2015? So staff and I want to finalize the areas that we want to review for the audit. And once we complete the second audit, we will review findings and develop goals with associate action steps and strategies and metrics. And so I'll turn it over to Amina Oftedal, and she'll highlight a few more strategies from this year's equity plan.
Thank you, Superintendent Battle, Chair Alt, members of the board. I appreciate given the opportunity to share some of the action steps that are on our plan, recognizing that the 21-22 plan is 1 year out of the 2018-22 plan that was put together under the leadership of Dr. Stacey Stanley following the findings of the audit. We are reconstituting our CPSS equity team. The members who had served there had been serving there for the last 4 years. And so we knew that we wanted to open it up to many more folks who would be able to contribute, as well as recognizing that the committee needs to be more representational of our student community. And so making sure that the voices of our Black, Indigenous, and people of color were heard on that committee. So that committee will be reconstituted with some returning members and some new members. Also, those folks will be able to champion the next step, which is site CPSS teams Those teams will be the champions, the leaders in their buildings to recognize the actions that are going on, procedures, activities, things that the building leadership team are involved in, that those are conducted and conceived with an equity lens. And furthering the professional development in the buildings rather than being led at the district level. We will be conducting a CPSS Teacher Academy. We hope to have the first cohort complete during the spring, before the end of the spring semester, and the second cohort take part in June, so that we would have 50 new teachers who have completed the 6-day training for the 22 school year. And we're really excited about that because we have invested over the last few years with many participants of the original equity team or CPSS team to be trainers, and we'd like to be able to access then those of us who have had that training and be able to share that throughout the district and use those skills. We do want to continue to work with our hiring and support and retention of staff of color, and making sure that we are examining barriers that might exist there to their hiring and support to increase our retention. The representation of our diverse community in our advisory teams, really making that concerted effort to reach out to the community and send invitations to our families that so that our parent organizations are much more representational. We'll continue on with our partnership with the YMCA to do our training with the operations and non-teaching staff, especially targeting the leaders there so that they can continue that work amongst their own staff. The evaluation and effectiveness, as you see in the metric column, those are the metrics that we will use to determine the level of success, and so we'll be setting those SMART goals for each and every one of these action strategies. Finally, the evaluation of impact and effectiveness, coming back to the equity audit to see the progress that we've made over the last 7 years, as well as identifying new areas in which we can grow and improve. Also continuing with our seeing the results in our academics achievement and our reduction of disparities as brought forth through the SMART goals of the world's best workforce and the achievement integration. Just as a rough overview, those are our big pieces that we'll be working on, and the bullets underneath those kind of share what the sub-strategies are, but there's a lot of continued equity work to do, and we're very, very excited about the momentum that we have.
And that concludes my report for tonight, Chair Alt and directors.
Thank you very much, Dr. Battle. Thank you, Amina. Board members, I'll open it up for comments and questions. Director Schatz.
Thank you for the report, Dr. Battle and Amina. It's the work that we do is important, and this is so much at the heart of what ISD 191 stands for, and not only for our students, but for our staff and our families. So thank you for that continued work, and I look forward to hearing future reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Miller. Oh, Director Courier, sorry.
Yes, as I listened to your report, I thought about the 30 years that we have been working on equity. And really, CPSS has really pulled it together. We've done lots of options, but CPSS has actually done what it says it can do. So congratulations on the efforts, and it works. It works. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Courier. Director Chester, I think you have your hand up.
I do, thank you. Yes, thank you for our work with CPSS and being culturally proficient. One question that I have regarding attracting, supporting, and retaining staff. I didn't see necessarily a bullet under there targeting retention of staff, and wondering if there was going to be work in collaborating with our bargaining units in terms of having maybe a collaborative effort on retention of staff.
Thank you for the question, Director Chester, members of the board. And so all of our bargaining unit leaders value all of its members. And so it's very difficult when we have our colleagues that we have worked in partnership with and gotten to know, and then due to finances, we've had to let some of those colleagues know. So Stacey Sovine is actually joining us, and I'd like him to share a few comments too. So there is a commitment from the bargaining units. They do value their members. And so it's really been difficult, not only for us, but for them as well. And so when it comes to our Black, Indigenous, and people of color staff, so yes, there is a commitment and a concerted effort to look at some real actions and different ideals. So, Director Sovine.
To your question, when you're asking about negotiations is a way path, and again, as Dr. Battles pointed out, both sides of the table have to bring the proposal, not necessarily bring the proposal to the table, but both sides would have to agree to the language of the proposal, so that's a negotiated thing. Retention, when it's like with our at-will groups, with our unaffiliated groups, that provides a lot of latitude for the board to be able to retain staff. But when it comes to negotiations and the process to lay staff off or reduce staff, again, that's going to have to be reduced. And as long as we have declining enrollment and a budget issue as we have, that makes it very difficult between the two, between the resources that we have and the contracts that we have to pull and truly defend retention. And that's the sad truth of where we are until we come to that agreement with our labor unions.
Thank you, Stacey. Any other questions? Director Miller.
So my first question was actually in the same vein of the last there, only I'll just rephrase it a little. I'm just curious, that bullet point on slide 7 reads attract, support, and retain diverse staff. Trying to understand what role CPSS has played in the retention of diverse staff. As you know, I know that as was intimated in the previous conversation, there's a larger issue outside of CPSS driving the retention issue. So is there a reason why we put retain diverse staff in the bullet point on this? Is there something specific that CPSS has helped us in that process?
Thank you, Director Miller, members of the board. So I think if you look back to the slide about barriers, and so representation matters for our children and families. And so when you don't see role models on a daily basis, that can be a barrier for our children. So that's how I see CPSS, just on that one tool. I also think it helps us, one of the things we should look at is always to be aware of how our practices and policies and our actions impact the diversity of our students. And so, as you know, the most important factor in a student's achievement is a teacher. And so there are other factors, but that relationship between the teacher and the student is the most important factor in a student's achievement. And so I would say very briefly, that is how the CPSS, there are other examples in the framework, and I don't know if Amina wanted to add to that, but I would see directly that a tool of actually identifying barriers to cultural proficiency, if you don't have representation of diverse groups within your staff, you cannot be aware of those lived experience of diverse members of our staff and in our community.
Okay. the other thing I wanted to dive down into a little bit was, so we're at a stage now where it's an evaluation process, sort of the last step of this of this process. A couple of questions. First of all, are we going to get some sort of results then from this evaluation? Will there be a follow-up, a report of such of this? If so, when? I heard this talk about the equity audit, and it sounds like, and I wasn't party to the decision-making around CPSS or here when this was first done. It sounds like it was based, and maybe I misunderstood, but based heavily on sort of a self-evaluation of our staff and their feelings about cultural awareness in the district, which strikes me as a bit biased. If you have be frank, we have a disproportionately white teacher representation, and if you're asking them if they feel culturally proficient, they're probably going to say yes, because they're not as aware of what they're exposed to or not exposed to. So I'm wondering if the evaluation will include some sort of external observation of what we've implemented, some testing and such. And then I get follow up on that. I would also be interested either now or when we come back and talk about this later. I guess, based on the timeline, we must have picked this 14-13, something 2014, 2013. The world is dramatically different today, especially in our awareness, our self-observation, our interaction along racial lines, and in our community is dramatically different. So in a general statement, I would wonder, is CPSS accomplishing what we have tasked it to accomplish? Is it the right tool for today? It might have been the right tool then. It may have served us well until now, but is it the right tool going forward? Or do we need to add more things? Do we need to maybe get something different? I'd be interested in knowing that answer.
If I could speak to that and respond to that. One of the advantages of the CPSS framework is that it is open to the use of multiple tools and adaptable to many different kinds of situations. And so one of the things we say is that CPSS is our framework, and that we, through our other equity learning, can bring those tools to the table. And many of our folks who have done, different types of equity training or have experience with different tools have brought them, and they fit within the CPSS framework. That framework is broad enough for it to adapt to all of the different tools that are there. So, the barriers don't change. If you look at the barriers that, the 4 barriers that we had in 2014, those are still very real and very relevant for us today. The guiding principles, still very real, very relevant, and that as a framework, it gives us a box, and then we fill that box with a variety of tools, new context, new situations, all of those particular pieces. And so even as I finished up with my training 2 weeks ago, we were talking about current events and what that CPSS framework looks like in this time of really civil unrest, and looking at elevating voices of people of color, and that those things are still prominent in the CPSS framework.
And Director Miller, regarding the data that was used in 2014, they did look at some data MCA. They also wanted to look at the enrollment in advanced courses, AP and CIS. Did it mirror the demographics? I think they did recognize, and I wasn't here, so others who were here can speak to it. They recognized that the audit should not be the end all for looking at, and so that's why they had the YMCA come in and work with students at Burnsville High School. So you're right, the audit was one piece, but there were other ways that the board and the staff at that time wanted to have a more comprehensive picture. So I wanted to share that piece.
And then if I could just add, there are 2 pieces. One, yes, there is some self-reporting. The self-reporting is a really important component because that addresses kind of the awareness of the barriers. And so that self-reporting is an important component to have, but we also have, through the Achievement and Integration Department at MDE, some research-based tools that are school observational forms and classroom walkthrough forms that really do have indicators to show whether or not that the instruction, the environment, the spaces, the leadership, the organization, all of the different components are actually aligning with equity indicators. And so that's a great tool that was supplied to us by MDE, and we will include that as part of our equity audit going forward.
And Director Miller is someone who was here when those decisions were made and when the audit was conducted. Yep. I remember appreciating that Dr. Stanley conducted the equity audit when she first arrived here. So in terms of the person who was leading the audit, she had more of an objective eye as someone who was coming in from the outside. And I thought that was really helpful in terms of knowing that, you know, we have a more objective observer going through this. So does that answer your? Yep. Okay. Dr. Hume, you had a question?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's one that has an easy answer right now, but one of the things that we've heard, is that me? One of the things we've heard about in the news a lot this year with COVID is the risk of distance learning and COVID on the impact on equity in our schools. And so I'm curious, as we're moving into this, you know, the next year of implementation, what challenges are we anticipating in light of the ongoing impact of COVID, and how are we going to be able to address those challenges this year when we have hybrid learning, at least for the foreseeable future, for our students?
Thank you, Director Hume. So it's very interesting looking at data that we've collected and data that the state has collected. So when you ask children of color about the impact of COVID, we know the disproportionate health impacts of COVID, but it's interesting, across Minnesota, some children of color are saying they're actually seen in a virtual environment. So we're trying to unpack that data. And as you know, some children we thought might thrive with a transition are not thriving in a virtual, and some are actually learning that's the best way they learn. And so I think there's still more to learn about the impact on our equity goals that COVID has had. I have been reading research about the impact of learning loss. There's two studies, one done after Hurricane Katrina and the students in Louisiana, and they actually said if teachers, when they come back to school, focus on what's most important, they actually do catch up. And then there's another study on the impact from Australia with the natural disaster that happened there too. So we have to look at the data, find out where our children are, don't make assumptions, talk to the children, and then really be focused and purposeful in our instruction. So Amina, I don't know if you have something to add.
I would like to add that last spring, as we moved into distance learning for all students, we were able to see some of those disparities and inequities and have proactively tried to address those as we moved into distance learning this year. We spent some time this summer looking at connectivity issues, where are we putting our resources, as well as continuing to look at how we can create those virtual environments in which students' voices can be heard, that students can be seen and heard, and the video conferencing tool is allowing for a lot of opportunities there and learning. So as we look at some of those issues where we see inequities, connectivity and technology is one, which Technology Director Gordon has done an amazing job with her team to address that. But we also need to continue to address grading and evaluation, assessment environments, attendance policies and procedures, And those are areas where we've seen a lot of disparities with our students of color, and these are great opportunities for us to have some of those open discussions. And so as we are looking at attendance data right now and asking the question about what does it mean to attend in a virtual environment, we are looking at that in terms of who do these rules apply to, and who are the ones that, for whom the particular really stickler for rules in the old version, I guess, in a face-to-face version would tend to be a barrier for them. And I think having those conversations about attendance, about assessment, about grading, all of those particular pieces have been are really upfront for us right now, and looking at that in a different way, because we are being forced to look at a new structure. And this is an opportunity to look at those new structures and address those disparities directly.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Director Hume? No, okay. I just had a comment. I always appreciate hearing about CPSS and equity work. And Dr. Battle, you and I have talked about this a number of times, that, you know, when we're talking about diversity, of course, it's incredibly important to focus on our students and staff of color. We know that. And I think we also, at the same time, need to be mindful of the fact that diversity goes beyond race, that there's also, for example, male teachers at elementary, there's gender identity, you know, any number of unique traits that make us special. And I know it's easy just to talk about students and staff of color, and that's very important, and we also need to, in the back of our minds, and I know, Dr. Battle, you and I have talked about this a lot, that, you know, we're really thinking about all that makes us unique and special.
Thank you for that, Chair. Let me give one example that we were addressing last week related to policy. So we've had more than a few parents contact us that their child is now choosing a different pronoun. And so the enrollment staff did consult with me and others, Stacey, Sovine.
Sorry, guys.
So, because there's an issue, you can't change our records from the legal name. And so we actually reached out to some other districts that have already implemented what do you do to honor this child and the choice. And so we will be honoring those. And so that's a very concrete example of how, when you're looking at equitable outcomes, you need to make sure your children believe they are seen and valued for their authentic self, and that request to change the pronoun or the name from what the legal name is. So how do we honor? So thank you for bringing that. And so, yes, we are all working on gender, culture, race, and ethnicity, so that each child is seen and valued and appreciated in our system. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. All right, I think we've pretty much gotten through all of our questions, so we will move on to our next agenda item. Staying with Dr. Battle, we will be receiving an update about District 191's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance issued by the MDE and the MDH respectively.
Thank you, Chair Alt and members of the board. The purpose of the COVID-19 report is to provide an update on District 191's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance. Tonight, I will share information related to 2 of our 4 primary areas of our planning: health and safety and student and family support. Tonight, I want to first acknowledge all staff for their work as we launched a full distance learning model through Virtual Academy and a hybrid model of in-person and online learning. To say the least, it has been a task, a monumental task. We planned for it beginning this summer, well, really last spring, but stepped up our planning once the governor and MDE gave us guidance. and we implemented the hybrid model slowly through our staggered school start. So now we have almost completed 3 weeks with all hybrid students experiencing in-person learning. So now is the time to see how our plans have worked in practice. I want to acknowledge that we have had a solid implementation of hybrid and virtual academy, yet we are still problem solving with issues that are a concern to students, families, and teachers. I have anecdotal evidence that overall things are going well. Overall, parents and teachers are supportive of the switch to synchronous from asynchronous learning that was implemented last spring. Students and staff are adhering to health and safety protocols, and attendance is good. Yet we have challenges of large class sizes in virtual academy, teachers managing an all virtual learning environment and managing both in-person and virtual learning at the same time. Additionally, full student engagement in active learning and virtual classes in hybrid and virtual academy can be difficult to manage. Even though I did visit the kindergarten class, and I have to tell all the students there, the kindergartners did an excellent job staying engaged. For virtual academy, we are challenged with transitioning staff when we are immediately honoring parents' requests to go from hybrid to virtual. Thus, that request and honoring those immediately is causing an imbalance in staffing. Even though we've hired more staff to help to reduce class sizes, we still have some class sizes of 40. We are going to survey students, parents, and staff with the hope of learning more about how our plans have been operationalized and the impact on our constituents. With that, I want to move on to health and safety and then an area of parent engagement. So today, Minnesota Department of Health released the 14-day case rate per 10,000 residents. The following numbers represent the time period from 9/27 through 10/10. Unfortunately, both our counties, Dakota and Scott, have shown an increase. Dakota County is 24.06, which is an increase from 20.73. Scott is at 22.60, an increase from 22.25. We must use the confirmed cases per 100,000 residents for Dakota County since it is higher. For this data, we will remain in the hybrid learning model. But I must tell you, the COVID-19 leadership team, the COVID-19 advisory committee, and I will continue to look at the trends. If we have an increase again next week, the key indicators and decision process for selecting the learning model that is best for District 191 will be crucial. On Tuesday, the leadership team for COVID-19 continued the discussion about those key indicators and the process. And tomorrow, the COVID-19 advisory team will continue its discussion. And so, as we look at the numbers, we will look at the learning model parameters. So from 20 to 29, it's hybrid learning for all students. When you hit 30 to 49, it's hybrid learning for elementary students and distance learning for secondary students. 50 is distance learning for all students. If you look at the county data released today, there are some very prominent, I wouldn't say prominent, but large, the largest, Anoka and Hennepin also increased. But when you look at the list, it's pretty stunning. The counties that are already at 50, there's even a county that's at 90. And so you've seen the news and numbers that in Minnesota it's increasing. So you look at the county data, you can see it. And so I wanted to share that with you and our community. And I thank the support of the leadership and the advisory leadership team. Moving on to student and family support. Reminder that parent-teacher conferences are November 2nd and 3rd, and I hope parents will take this opportunity to learn more about classroom curriculum and to ask questions from your child's teachers. I want to highlight that to complement these upcoming conferences, middle school teachers held a virtual open house yesterday. So on Wednesdays, the teachers have 4 classes. So Wednesdays is our district, everyone is in distance learning on Wednesdays. So they offer 4 classes. And so parents were invited to meet for the last 15 minutes, to come and join the last 15 minutes to meet the teacher. Because remember, the open houses were virtual. So to actually meet the teacher, learn more about what the students have been engaged in, and to answer any questions. And so the middle school principals have reported that they've actually seen an increase in parent and great engagement through virtual meetings from the fall open house. And so they think, as I think it was Director Hoon asked about what the impact is, a good impact is they think they need to always offer a virtual parent conference. So for various reasons, when we talk about really attending to our parents' needs, there are some parents who aren't mobile, and so it's difficult to come up to the school. And so a virtual is a great option, and we've seen that with teletherapy. More people are attending their therapy sessions because they don't have the barrier of travel. And so I wanted to share that. We're looking at parent engagement very differently through our response to COVID-19. And this concludes my report.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Battle. Board members, any comments? Director Chester, I'm just going to check in with you to make sure you don't have your hand raised. No.
No question, we're good.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much. This is always a very informative report. All right, next we are moving to committee assignments and board assignments. Before I open it up for reports, I did want to make note that the board will be taking action this evening to fill vacancies in committee based on Director Hallwiger's resignation. So I just wanted to call that out for folks. And that's the MSBA Legislative Committee negotiations and the Edward Neal Elementary School assignment. With that, are there, let's see, committee reports, starting with Policy Review Committee. Director Chester.
Thank you, Gerald. Yes, the Policy Review Committee met last week to go over a couple policies that you see on the agenda today. One is on the consent agenda 602, which has one minor change, and that's on organization of the school calendar and school day. And then one that will be presented tonight on the regular business, policy 522, regarding the changes to the Title IX policy on sexual discrimination grievance policy. So those will be coming forward today.
Great.
And that's all I have.
Thank you. Next, Director Schatz with the Negotiations Committee.
There is no report from the Negotiations Committee.
Great. All right, next, Legislative Committee.
I can share an update.
Awesome.
The Legislative Committee had its monthly meeting on this past Monday, October the 19th, and the agenda was focused on the process for drafting the district's legislative platform for next year, which we'll be discussing at an upcoming board retreat.
Awesome, thank you. Student Performance and Achievement Committee. This is a committee of the whole, and in the officers' meetings, we continue to talk about SPA reports, and it's certainly not for lack of staff preparedness that we're not receiving these reports. It really is more about the work that we must get done, and we have to prioritize. Not to say that the SPA reports aren't important, they are, but we do need to get through the business of the district first. So next, are there any reports for board appointments? Director
Yes.
Courier.
The Association of Metropolitan School Districts, the October AMSD meeting featured Dr. Tom Melcher as the guest speaker with a talk entitled Overview of School Finance Working Group Draft Recommendations. Usually AMSD puts the PowerPoint on their website. However, a lot of what Dr. Melcher presented on October 2nd is out of date already. Scott Kronquist, Executive Director of AMSD, noted, quote, "The School Finance Working Group will be reviewing a new draft of the recommendations at its meeting this Thursday evening, as we're meeting, and as soon as that is available, we will share it with AMSD board members." And I'm assuming you all get AMSD reports, so keep checking those. Also, he sent us a copy of the Morris Leatherman September presentation, which I'll work with Jamie on how to send the link to you. The next report I have is on 917. The regular meeting of Intermediate District 917 was remotely held on October 6, 2020. There were regular reports from Melissa Schaller on the special education programs and from Eric Van Brocklin on the decals and vocational programs. Besides consent items, donations, and standard business service items, 12 policies were reviewed and acted upon. New business included approval of temporary work agreements, approval of assurance of compliance with state and federal laws, approval of renewals for LTD and life insurance, and approval of medical and dental insurance rates for the 2021-2022 school year. It also included October 1 enrollment counts for both special education and decals and vocational programs. Today, we had a superintendent and board member work session in virtual format. It was facilitated by Ray Queener of TeamWorks International. The goal was to evaluate the 9/17, 2021, 2024 strategic objectives and collect feedback to inform the 9/17 school board. I think it was time well spent. And that concludes my 9/17 report. Then I have a Hall of Fame report. There have been no meetings. However, Jim Green, the current chair, sent out an email to committee members in early October seeking committee member opinions on how we should proceed for recognition for Hall of Fame members. Specifically, should we skip 2020? In other words, not install anybody in the Hall of Fame, or should we combine 2020 with 2021? So we were to send in our preferences, which I did. But one future item for this board to consider will be if you want to have a board member participate on the Hall of Fame committee or not. Now, the Hall of Fame committee had in their constitution or in their bylaws that there had to be a board member. Well, I don't know if it's even legal for that to happen. So I think they changed the language, may have a board member. However, since the inception of the Hall of Fame, there has always been a school board member on the Hall of Fame committee. So one future item for this board to consider after December is, do you want to have a board member participate on the Hall of Fame committee or not? There has now, this board, the Hall of Fame committee, was begun when the high school celebrated its 50th anniversary, and I think that was 12 or 15 years ago. So that concludes my reports.
Thank you, Director Courier. Are there any other reports from board members? No? All right. Then the final piece of information I would like to offer up is a report about board self-evaluation. We'll remember, board members, that as part of our board organization document, we included an annual, the desire to do a self-evaluation of ourselves on an annual basis, 1 year formally and the next year less formally. Well, last year we did the formal self-evaluation with the help of MSBA. And now this year we're looking simply at a survey that we'll complete among ourselves, and then that information will come back to us as a report, which we will discuss amongst ourselves. And I just wanted to raise up for discussion, just check in with you in terms of the proposed timeline, because I think it's important to complete the evaluation with this board, because we completed last year's self-evaluation with this board, and then we have a solid 2 years of baseline data from which to move forward with. So basically looking at completing the survey by the end of October, getting the link tomorrow from MSBA, completing it, the survey by October 29th, and then discussing the report in our, in a November retreat discussion, which we'll be taking action on again tonight. So I just wanted to put that out there if anyone has questions or concerns about any of that. No? All right.
Good.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just said it sounds good.
Okay, good. All right, so next, excuse me, turning to the consent agenda, although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. Is there anything that board members would like to separate? Seeing none, I will take a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester, second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hume. Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Schatz,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Courier.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Turning to new business, starting with, we're being asked to approve board candidate application timeline. And Clerk Courier is going to read the resolution.
Whereas a vacancy exists on the Board of Education due to the resignation of Jen Hallwiger, and whereas a vacancy exists in the Office of School Board Director with a term expiring the first Monday of January 2023, and whereas the vacancy occurs after the last day to file affidavits of candidacy for the next school district general election, and whereas more than 2 years remain in the unexpired term, now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of Independent School District Number 191, State of Minnesota, as follows. 1, the board will appoint an individual to serve in the vacant director's position until a successor is qualified at a special election. 2, the Board of Education will accept applications from individuals interested in filling filling the vacant director's position beginning on October 23rd, 2020 at 8 a.m. and ending on November 6th, 2020 at 1 p.m. 3, the appointment will be evidenced by a resolution adopted by the Board of Education and entered into the school board minutes and will continue until a special election is held under Minnesota statutes, Section 123B.09, Subdivision 5. 4, the appointee will be sworn in as a director of the Independent School District Number 191 Board of Directors during a regular business meeting of the board to be held on January 14th, 2021.
Thank you, Director Courier. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Director Schatz, second.
Second.
Seconded by Director Hume. Discussion or comments? Hearing none.
Yeah,
Oh, Director Miller?
I just wanted to make a public statement because
As you're aware, I am currently running for reelection to my seat here at this table. With in consideration, it would obviously be advantageous for me to sort of quote unquote hedge my bets by potentially filling an application out for this role. I don't feel that would put anyone at this table in a good seat. I don't think, and also don't think it would be a good action of transparency for me to do that. So I am unequivocally stating for public record that I will not apply an application to this for Jen's seat in any situation. So I believe that will free me up to participate in the process of selecting the replacement of this for this seat. So.
Thank you very much, Director Miller. Any other comments or questions? No? All right, Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Miller,
Aye.
Chance,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester. Aye. Courier,
Aye.
Hume.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Next, we are being asked to adopt a resolution approving the Open Facilities Action Plan and authorizing administration to proceed with next steps for possible sale or lease of open facilities of ISD 191. Dr. Battle.
Thank you, Chair Alt. So yes, I am recommending that the board adopt the formal resolution approving the Open Facilities Action Plan and authorizing administration to proceed with next steps for possible sale, lease of open facilities of ISD 191. This resolution is based on several board open facility discussions. And so now I turn it over to Director Courier, who will read the resolution.
Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District 191, State of Minnesota, as follows. 1. The School Board of Independent School District 191 intends to seek special legislation by the Minnesota Legislature to provide that notwithstanding the provisions of Minnesota statutes, Section 123B.51, subdivisions 4 and 6, proceeds of the sale or lease of current school facilities or land may be transferred into the general undesignated fund to the full extent permitted under federal tax law and associated U.S. Treasury regulations. It is understood that no land and/or building sales or lease agreement shall be executed by the district before legislation authorizing such a transfer has been approved. Number 2, pursuant to Minnesota statutes, Section 123B.51, subdivisions 3 and 4, land and buildings will not be sold or leased to organizations that would compete with 191 for enrollment or funding, or that would operate in any way that would interfere with the educational programs taking place on such properties. Number 3, the proposed Open Facilities Action Plan encompasses the following. A, Marion W. Savage Elementary, known as MWS, and Sioux Trail Elementary, known as ST, will continue to be used as ISD 191 child care facilities as long as COVID impacts our ability to group and transport ISD 191 students. Once COVID is no longer a consideration, we will actively work to find non-competitive partners for a lease arrangement of these facilities. B, River Ridge Educational Center will continue to house BEST until a purchaser for the facility is found and a sales agreement is negotiated and executed, at which time BEST will move to Diamond Head Center, DEC. C, subject to Minnesota statutes, Section 123B.51, subdivisions 3 and 4, and federal tax regulations, district administration may lease some or all space at Metcalf Middle School, MMS, to non-competitive partner organizations with an understanding that such leases will terminate at such time as the School Board of Independent School District 191 agrees to sell the land and buildings of MMS. D, up to 4 acres of land at DEC may be sold after special legislation has been adopted as discussed in paragraph 1 above. Number 4, the board hereby approves the Open Facilities Action Plan as presented to the board. District staff and consultants are hereby authorized and directed to proceed with the implementation of the Open Facilities Action Plan, including, without limitation, pursuing special legislation substantially as described in this resolution, subject to the approval by the board of any special laws approved by the state legislature as provided in Minnesota statutes, section 645.021, and further subject to approval by the board of any contract for the sale or lease of any district facility or land contemplated in this resolution.
Thank you, Director Courier. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume, second.
Second.
Seconded by Director Miller. Discussion or questions? Director Courier.
I just wanted to clarify that the River Ridge Educational Center will continue to house BEST, and BEST is one of our programs in the district. We didn't clarify that in the
Yep.
resolution.
Good point. Yep. Any other comments? All right. Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Franz,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester. Aye. Courier,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Finally, we are being asked to approve on a first reading basis changes to Policy 522, Title IX Sex Nondiscrimination Policy, Grievance Procedure and Process. And we'll be with Stacey Sovine, Executive Director of Human Resources. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you, Chair Alt, Dr. Battle, members of the board. Earlier this year, the Office for Civil Rights, or otherwise known as the OCR, at the U.S. Department of Education announced new Title IX requirements defining sexual harassment in federal regulations for the first time and governing sexual harassment complaints and investigations. The new standards outline comprehensive notice and procedural requirements schools must follow when responding to sexual harassment claims from both students and employees. Title IX traditionally has been addressed towards students for sexual discrimination, but what the new regulations from the Office for Civil Rights is doing, it is now moving into sexual harassment, both for students and for staff. So this is a big shift, and as you have probably noted on the red line from the old policy, it is pretty much all red line because of the new requirements that are being outlined for us to move forward. The Policy Review Committee reviewed this policy 522, both on September 8th and October 13th, 2020. And with that, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approves on a first reading basis changes to Policy 522, Title IX, Sex Non-Discrimination Policy, Grievance Procedure and Process.
Thank you, Stacey. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Director Schatz, second.
Second.
Seconded by Director Courier. Questions? Hearing none. Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Courier,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Schatz.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. I will now declare us adjourned. We will be adjourning to a board workshop where we will start with a review draft of the strategic plan dashboard with Dr. Battle. We will receive a report from Emina Aftadal about the pre-K-12 pathways rollout. And finally, we will close out the workshop with more discussion on board vacancy planning. Shall we take a 5-minute break? Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute.